Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this stage of our proceedings. This week we're going to hear opening statements, first from counsel to the inquiry and then from counsel for the various core participants, or at least those who wish to make one. Before I invite Mr. Millett to address us, I just need to have a quick word with the lady shorthand writers. Do you need a break during the morning? Is 5 minutes enough? All right, thank you very much. Mr. Millett, you may have heard that exchange with the shorthand writers. They would like a break during the morning, so could I invite you to find a time that's convenient to you between about 11:15 and 11:30 when we can all leave the room for a few minutes. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. and Madam Assessors, Grenfell Tower is a residential high-rise block of flats built in 1974. It is located in the Lancaster West estate in North Kensington, West 11. In the early hours of Wednesday, the 14th of June, 2017, a fire broke out within the kitchen of flat 16 on the 4th floor of Grenfell Tower. The fire soon broke out of the flat, which was on the east elevation, and took hold in the exterior cladding on the building, through which it spread rapidly upwards, around, and back into the building. Within a matter of hours, the majority of the tower was substantially destroyed by fire, with the tragic loss of 71 lives on that night. It bears repeating that the fire at Grenfell Tower was the largest loss of human life to fire in the United Kingdom since the Piper Alpha disaster of July 1988, and the worst loss of life to fire in domestic premises since the Second World War. On the 15th of June 2017, the Prime Minister announced a public inquiry into the causes of and circumstances surrounding the fire. On the 15th of August 2017, and after public consultation conducted by the Chairman personally, the terms of reference were approved by the Prime Minister as the sponsoring minister, and the inquiry was, at that point, formally established. On the 21st of May this year, the inquiry opened with 7 days of commemorations of the 71 lives of those who died in the fire at Grenfell Tower, and also of the life of Maria del Pilar Burton, or Pilly, who died in January this year. We have all heard and been deeply moved by the stories of the families left behind by their loved ones who perished at Grenfell, and of the lives that were lost. Today is day 8 of the hearings of phase 1 of the public inquiry, when we turn to opening statements by counsel. I plan to address you for today, followed by counsel for the core participants, or CPs, as I will refer to them, beginning with the Metropolitan Police Service, and then following the order circulated among the CPs last Friday. Although my opening statement will be concerned with much technical and other expert evidence, the fundamental question which lies at the heart of our work is how, in London, in 2017, a domestic fire developed so quickly and so catastrophically that an entire high-rise block was engulfed, and how it was that 71 people lost their lives in a matter of hours, leaving families and friends in shock, grief, and bewilderment, leaving hundreds without a home, their possessions destroyed, their precious mementos in ashes, their families shattered, their community devastated, their lives permanently scarred, and for an inheritance, an abiding sense of injustice, betrayal, and marginalization, leading to an overwhelming question: why? This inquiry was established under, and is proceeding under, the Inquiries Act 2005 and under the Inquiry Rules 2006. It is the largest public inquiry ever established, at least in terms of numbers of CPs, and the issues are wide-ranging and complex. The inquiry is also having to proceed at speed, as fast as it reasonably can, in light of the obvious risks to public safety posed by exterior fires on residential tower blocks. The inquiry must also be conducted alongside the police's continuing criminal investigation. The parallel progress of the inquiry and the criminal investigation gives rise to particular challenges, not least the need to ensure that the inquiry's obligation to pursue its own full and fair investigation does not prejudice the police's work, and vice versa. The inquiry has been very careful to avoid such a problem, and it is grateful for the continued cooperation it has received and continues to receive from the police. I start by introducing the inquiry team. I am the lead counsel to this inquiry, and I am part of a large team whom I shall introduce shortly. One of the primary roles of counsel to the inquiry is to assist with the assimilation and presentation of the evidence and the questioning of the witnesses and experts to the inquiry, from whom we shall hear during the course of our work. In essence, our job is to help the chairman and the assessors and the other panel members in due course, in phase 2, to lay bare the truth about what happened in order to answer the questions in the terms of reference. We have a duty to be independent, objective, fair-minded, and rigorous. With me today are my inquiry team of Queen's Counsel, Bernard Richmond QC, who is in the live stream room today, Kate Grange QC, and Andrew Kinnear QC, plus a supporting team of junior barristers Bilal Rawat, Rose Grogan, Hannah Curtin, Alex Ustic, Chloe Campbell, Samantha Jones, Zinat Islam, Emma Hines, Rachel Sullivan, Shanti Sivakumaran, Scarlett Milligan, and Daniel Laking. We are all supported by Caroline Featherston, the inquiry solicitor, and her team, comprising Kathy Kennedy, Shafi Nasser, Ross Howarth, Julia Dickens, Holly Waldron, Thomas Wood, Anna Venturino, and Victoria O'Brien. In all its work, the inquiry is supported by its secretary, Mark Fisher. Delini Daniel Selvaratnam is the Deputy Secretary and Head of External Affairs. Her team includes Jim Neri and George Austin Webster. Julian Fletcher is currently taking over from Amanda Jeffrey, in charge of operational and policy matters, and that team includes Tom Blackburn and Paul Edens. I should also mention that behind the scenes we have a large document review team headed by barristers Samantha Jones, Scarlett Milligan, and Daniel Laking, and comprising 10 junior barristers and 15 paralegals constantly at work. So far as the numbers of core participants are concerned, I should update you. There are 533 individuals, of whom 21 are children under the age of 18. The names of the children have not been published, and there are 2 CPs who have been anonymised as CCC and DDD. There are 29 organisations, of which 19 are commercial, 8 are public bodies, and 2 are trades unions. Representing and present on behalf of the various CPs or groups of CPs today are, for the police, Jeremy Johnson QC and Amy Clark. For the London Fire Brigade, or LFB, Stephen Walsh QC and Sarah Lefebvre. For bereaved survivors and residents, the group of 4 solicitors, or G4, Danny Friedman QC, Stephanie Barwise QC, Liz Davis, Raj Desai, and Jessie Nichols. For bereaved survivors and residents, the group of 10 solicitors, Michael Mansfield QC, Alison Munro, and Philip Dale. For bereaved survived and residents, also the group of 10 solicitors, which we call G10, Leslie Thomas QC, Talia Mara, and Jamie Burton. For bereaved survivors and residents, the group of 3 solicitors, or G3, Sam Steen QC, Pete Weatherby QC, Mark Henderson, and Fiona Murphy. For bereaved survivors and residents, Imran Khan Partners. For Mr. Behelu Kabidi, the tenant of Flat 16, Rajiv Menon QC. For the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, James Maxwell Scott QC and Catherine Sage. For the TMO, James Agaros QC. For Arconic, Stephen Hockman QC. For PSB UK, Shoesmiths. For CS Stokes, James Leonard. For Celotex, Charles Gibson QC. For the MHCLG, Jason Beer QC. For the Mayor, Anne Studd QC. For the FBU, Martin Seward. And for the FOA, Louis Brown QC. Ryden, CEP, Max Fordham, Thames Water, Cadent Gas and Whirlpool Corporation have put in written submissions but have told us that they do not wish to address you. I have been asked to read Harley Fasad's written opening into the record at the end of my opening, and I will do that. What now follows in my opening statement is intended by way of broad introduction to cover some 7 things. The first is the nature and the scope of the Phase 1 issues. The second is the programme for Phase 1 issues and associated points. Third, an update on the progress of the expert evidence at Phase 1. Fourth, the necessary background to the fire, comprising the building and the basic elements of the 2016 refurbishment, the active and passive fire safety systems relevant to Grenfell Tower, and the principal events of the night. In each case, to the extent that these issues are clear from the evidence which has already emerged. Fifth, the response of the emergency services. Sixth, emerging themes. And seventh, Phase 2. Much of what I'm going to say today will be very familiar to the core participants. One of the benefits of CP status is that you get confidential access to the material that the inquiry has obtained and discloses before the public gets to see it. Our job is to lay bare the truth, not only to the CPs, but also to the general public. So while my opening will contain little that is new to the CPs, much of it will be new to the public. I now turn to the nature and scope of the Phase 1 issues. In his opening statement on the 14th of September 2017, the chairman indicated that Phase 1 would concentrate on what happened on the night of the 14th of June 2017 and would seek to establish where and how the fire occurred, how it spread so rapidly to the whole of the building, and how the interior of the building became progressively affected by the development and spread of smoke. The chairman indicated that he intended to publish an interim report at the end of Phase 1 with such recommendations as it was possible to make at that stage. In detail, the issues for Phase 1 are, by reference to the updated list of issues which is on the inquiry's website, paragraph 3A, what modifications were made to the inside of the building, paragraph 11A and B, A, what was the cause and seat of the fire, B, how did the fire progress and what contribution to its progress was made by 1, the construction of the exterior walls and surfaces, openings to them, and internal structures abutting them. 2, the internal structure and condition of the building, including, for example, stairwells, shafts, vents, cavities, fire stopping, and pipework. Or 3, other factors, including the effectiveness or lack of effectiveness of fire safety measures. Paragraphs 12a, b, c, and d. A, what plans and strategies did the fire and rescue service have for dealing with a major fire in a high-rise residential building? What training and equipment did fire officers have for dealing with a major fire in a high-rise residential building? C, did the fire service have adequate access to the building? D, what actions were taken on the night of the 14th of June 2017 to fight the fire, including 1, first calls and responses, 2, assembly of strategy, command and control, 3, coordination with occupants of Grenfell Tower and other services during and immediately after the fire, including the establishment of radio communication channels, 4, the application of any stay-put policy and any change to a get-out and stay-out policy, and then 5, the methods of rescuing individual residents. And as far as relevant to those issues, paragraph 1a of the list of issues, what was the building's design, construction and composition? Paragraph 4b of the list of issues, what was the design, manufacture, composition and method of fixing of the exterior cladding to the building and other aspects of the refurbishment? Paragraph 5a, what were the fire-resistant prevention, mitigation, evacuation and other fire safety measures in place at the time of the fire? And paragraph 5i, in what ways was the building intended to be resistant to the spread of the fire? So far as they are relevant to the spread of the fire and smoke throughout the building, we will also be considering at phase 1, paragraph 9a of the list of issues, what advice was given to the residents about fire precautions. Paragraph 9b, how was that advice communicated and by whom? And paragraph 9h, were there any evacuation plans in place? And if so, what were they? This means that the focus of phase 1 will be the events of the night of the 14th of June 2017, and in particular, the state of the building at the time of the fire, including the existing fire safety and prevention measures at Grenfell Tower, where and how the fire started, the development of the fire and smoke, how the fire and smoke spread from its original seat to other parts of the building, the chain of events before the fire was finally extinguished, and the circumstances of the residents and others present in the tower, including those who evacuated the tower. As the chairman has said in the past, it would be sensible to retain a significant degree of flexibility in relation to the scope of the different phases. I will return to the question of scope when I come to the particular issues of firefighting and evacuation on the night of the fire. There are, of course, many other questions which have been raised by the BSRs, or bereaved survivors and residents, in their written opening submissions which we've received. How the building came to be as it was. How come the rain screen and insulation contained combustible materials? Was the relevant product literature robust and reliable? Was it accurate? Was the testing regime robust and reliable? What did the professionals know and do in respect of the cladding and the active and passive fire safety systems more generally in the building? How did so many people sign this building off as safe? Was saving money put before saving lives? To those who were bereaved or survived the fire, these questions are vitally important. However, before we can start to answer these questions as fully and as exhaustively as possible, our investigation must start with the events on the night of the 14th of June, as we will in this phase 1. Once those events have been examined and the chairman has made his fact findings, phase 2 will deal with the vital questions as to why the fire happened and who was responsible. You might ask, why does the inquiry need to hear so much technical and seemingly obscure detail? I would answer that the detail is essential because only a thorough examination of the detail can answer all of the questions and allow the world and future generations to understand exactly where the responsibility for such a devastating tragedy lay, and its importance in knowing how to prevent it again. The inquiry is grateful for the assistance that has been provided by all the CPs thus far. It is, however, right to say that the inquiry reasonably anticipated that CPs who were directly involved in the minutiae of the refurbishment and who know how the building came to be as it was, and in particular the active and passive fire prevention measures in place, would have used the opportunities presented by the opening statements to set out their knowledge in detail. It would have been of particular assistance to the inquiry if some of these CPs had positively engaged with the phase 1 issues and, crucially, the preliminary opinions of the inquiry experts on phase 1 issues as to the active and passive fire safety features of the building and the potential candidates for the cause, exit and spread of the fire. We may, of course, hear more when these CPs counsel, or some of them, come to address you later this week. At the moment, all I need to note is that some CPs have missed something of an opportunity to advance the inquiry's knowledge on vital questions. I will come back to what we should do about it later in this opening. In terms of how and to what extent the inquiry will play a role in discharging the state's responsibility under Article 2 of the European Convention on Human Rights, you, the Chairman, addressed that matter in your previous rulings of the 20th of December 2017 and the 21st of March 2018. As you made clear, there is considerable force in the submission that this inquiry should do all it can to make findings of the kind made, for example, by Lord Cullen in the Piper Alpha report, which may be sufficient to meet the requirements of an investigation that complies with Article 2. The inquiry has not made an independent assessment of the number of people who died in the fire. Details of the deceased have been agreed and provided by the police and the coroner. This number stands at 71. Although Pilly Burton survived the fire, she sadly died in January 2018, and the inquiry honoured her memory at the commemoration hearings, alongside those who died in June 2017. We welcome the offers of assistance which have been made by the legal representatives of the deceased's to provide support to the inquiry team in obtaining and presenting the evidence that is required for that particular task. We remain hopeful that it will prove possible to make sufficient findings of fact about where, when, and how the deceased came about their deaths without imposing an unreasonable burden on all those involved or any undue delay to the progress of the inquiry. I turn now to the Phase 1 programme, sitting arrangements and programming. First of all, sitting arrangements. The inquiry will sit here at Holborn Bars on 4 days a week, Monday to Thursday, starting at 10 a.m. and ending at 4:30 p.m. There will be a break for 1 hour for lunch and or prayers, and a short break in the morning and afternoon. That is the general proposal. It may be that exceptionally circumstances will require us to sit earlier or later, have longer breaks perhaps, or sit some or all of a Friday. This week we are going to break at 12:45 for prayers and for lunch for those who wish to take it. The inquiry hearings will be live streamed to the inquiry website and to the Notting Hill Methodist Church as they have been before. An official transcript will be taken of each day and will be made available on the inquiry's website each evening. The rooms on this floor here at Holborn Bars, which is the second floor, have all now been made available for the purposes of those attending the hearings. All are clearly marked, but please do ask the ushers or inquiry team if you would like some help. We have 2 breakout rooms for the bereaved survivors and residents and their legal teams at the end of the corridor, and you can watch the proceedings from one of those rooms if you would like some time away from the main hearing room in here. The other room will be a quiet space away from the proceedings. We also have a prayer room and 2 waiting rooms for those who are going to be giving evidence to the inquiry. The final room will be used by the NHS and Hestia Outreach and counselling teams, who some of you may recognise from the commemoration hearings that we've had. They will be identified by their blue NHS lanyards or green and orange scarves. The Holborn Bars fire alarm is routinely tested at 4:45 p.m. every Wednesday. It is clear when the alarm sounds that this is a test, but we will rise in plenty of time before that happens this Wednesday to allow people time to leave the building. We are not expecting any other fire alarm tests today or this week. If the alarm does sound, we will evacuate immediately. The security team and the ushers here, along with the De Vere staff on site, will be on hand to help everyone leave the building safely. Can I now turn to the Phase 1 programme? The programme for Phase 1 will proceed as follows. From the 4th to the 7th of June, this week, we have oral opening statements. I'm going to open for today, and it probably won't be all day. The following 2 days have been allocated to counsel for the bereaved survivors and residents, court participants, to be divided up between them as they see fit. Counsel for the various groups of bereaved survivors and residents have distributed the issues between themselves in order to achieve a minimum of overlap and to maximise the efficient use of time. The remaining day or so will be allocated to counsel for the remaining CPs who have chosen to address the inquiry at this stage. All counsel who are to speak have helpfully provided the inquiry with written submissions, and those have been circulated among the CPs. Next week, in the week commencing Monday the 11th of June and ending on Friday the 15th of June, there will be no sittings. This is to allow the bereaved and the survivors and the Grenfell community at large the time and the space in which to remember and to reflect upon their lost ones at the distressing time of the first anniversary of the fire. In the period 18th to the 20th of June, Monday to Wednesday, certain of the inquiry's Phase 1 experts, namely Dr. Lane, Professor Nick Dade, and Professor Bisbee, will make oral and visual presentations, likely in that order. I should emphasise that these presentations are for the purposes of setting the context for the evidence to be called in Phase 1, and in particular in order to explain the physical features and layout of the building. They will give their formal evidence and answer questions later in the Phase 1 process. On Thursday, the 21st of June, it is hoped, the chairman will start receiving factual evidence, and the present intention is to begin with the evidence relevant to the flat of fire origin, namely flat 16 on the 4th floor of Grenfell Tower, and the circumstances surrounding the initial outbreak of fire. It is estimated that no more than 1 day would be needed to hear that evidence. Our intention is to read the evidence of the occupants of flat 16 into the inquiry record at this stage, and then, if necessary, call Mr. Kabidi, who was the tenant, in September with all the other bereaved survivors and residents who will be giving oral evidence. I'll come back to say a little bit more about that in due course. On Monday, the 25th of June, the present intention is to call firefighter witnesses and to do so in a broadly chronological order of arrival on the night, starting with the crew of the first appliances on the scene. The first firefighter will be watch manager Mike Dowden. The inquiry would aim to complete the evidence from the LFB firefighters, if possible, by Wednesday, the 1st of August, 2018. The inquiry estimates that a total of some 52 firefighter witnesses will be called to give oral evidence. That number includes numerous firefighters who undertook active firefighting and search and rescue. It includes LFB control room staff and commanders at various stages who were responsible for the decisions taken at various points on the night. The inquiry will give careful consideration to the need to call additional live evidence from LFB witnesses as the evidence progresses. The inquiry has also identified some 74 LFB witnesses whose written witness statements, or at least the relevant extracts from those statements, we presently intend to read into the record. This list is necessarily provisional, and it may be supplemented as the Phase 1 hearings proceed. The inquiry circulated a provisional list and order of such witnesses in mid-May to all core participants, and it has kept updated the list as matters have progressed. The inquiry has also asked for evidence from the police and from the London Ambulance Service regarding their respective roles and experiences on the night. If this evidence is to be called, then the inquiry anticipates that it will be on Thursday, the 2nd of August. So far as August is concerned, there will be no oral evidence taken during that month, after the 2nd of August. However, the month can, and I hope will, be valuably used in programming the timing of the evidence that we are going to call from the bereaved survivors and residents. When we come to September, on the provisional assumption, and it is provisional, that we conclude the oral evidence of the firefighters on the 2nd of August, we will resume hearings on Wednesday, the 5th of September, with any further Phase 1 witnesses we can programme in before we start with the first of the BSR witnesses. We have picked that date to allow the BSRs, bereaved survivors and residents, time to get their children back to school that week. The chairman will hear their evidence throughout September 2018. As matters currently stand, the inquiry has received a total of 135 written witness statements from bereaved survivors and residents, 60 from survivors who escaped the tower, and 75 from other witnesses, including bereaved residents who were not present and observers. As soon as possible, the inquiry will provide details as to which bereaved survivors and residents who have provided written statements will be called to give oral evidence and in what order. We would hope to be able to complete the bereaved survivors and residents' evidence, as I say, by the end of September. But this time frame is necessarily provisional. After the bereaved survivors and residents have given their Phase 1 oral evidence, it may be necessary to allow a further week or so of hearings to accommodate any further factual evidence, including from the police and the London ambulance services. Depending on how long the hearing of the factual evidence takes to complete, the inquiry would aim to start hearing the expert evidence on or around Monday the 1st of October 2018 over a period, provisionally again, of 8 to 10 days, up to about the 16th of October 2018. Following the end of the oral evidence, there will then be a break of 14 days or so, following which the hearings would resume on Wednesday the 31st of October 2018 with closing oral statements over 5 days. The Chairman has not yet decided whether to invite written closing statements, and that question will be kept under review. I now turn to give an update on the progress of expert evidence. As part of Phase 1, the inquiry and the core participants have had the benefit of detailed preliminary reports from a number of the inquiry's experts. Those experts' reports have been available to core participants for a number of weeks, subject to conditions of confidentiality. Now that the Phase 1 hearings have commenced, those expert reports will be made available today on the inquiry's website. In particular, the following reports have been prepared for Phase 1 and disclosed to core participants. A report from Mr. Colin Todd. He has reviewed the relevant regulatory regime as it applied to Grenfell Tower. A report from Professor Niamh Nic Dade. She has considered the cause and origin of the fire. A report from Professor Luke Bisbee. He has considered the ignition of the facade materials and reviewed the available evidence regarding the spread of the fire across the exterior of the tower. We have a report from Dr. Barbara Lane. She has covered a broad range of issues relating to fire safety engineering, including identification of the active and passive fire safety measures in the building and the extent to which they failed on the night. We have a report from Professor Jose Terrero. He has considered the ignition of the facade materials, the fire spread to and onto the exterior of the tower, and the spread of fire and smoke within the tower. These preliminary experts' reports reflect a significant amount of synthesis of the Phase 1 evidence already gathered. They will provide a vital forensic focus for the inquiry's ongoing investigation. And as I will outline later in this opening, they identify a number of important lines of inquiry, particularly as to how the building performed on the night and the aspects of the building which may have led to such significant spread of fire and smoke. I must also emphasize that the experts' reports are preliminary and in many respects a work in progress. as the experts themselves are at pains to stress, at this early stage, and before all the evidence has been heard, their reports can only provide provisional views and identify further lines of inquiry. All of the experts will be carefully considering the evidence as it develops during the course of Phase 1. If necessary, the experts will serve supplemental reports in advance of the experts' oral evidence, to the extent that the evidence that they have heard or have read affects their written opinions which they have so far expressed. They can also provide updating evidence when they come to give oral evidence in, we hope, October. It is at that point that their evidence will be thoroughly tested. Core participants, members of the public, and the media are therefore urged to treat their opinions thus far expressed as necessarily provisional until that point. It should also be emphasised that the expert opinions are just that. They are expressions of their expert opinions. It will be for you, Mr. Chairman, to decide what findings you should make in your Phase 1 report, having heard all of the factual evidence as well as hearing from the experts in person. Some of the core participants have highlighted certain differences of view or differences of emphasis as between the inquiry's expert opinions on certain matters. That there are such differences is wholly unsurprising, given the complexity of some of the technical issues, and given the fact that the experts have different areas of expertise and different backgrounds. We consider that it is in the public interest to receive a range of professional views from relevant experts, and the inquiry welcomes that in order better to understand the shape of many of the technical issues it has to consider. In addition to the list of Phase 1 experts that I have already identified, there are two other experts from whom we will be hearing evidence at this phase of the inquiry. First, Dr. Duncan Glover. He is a forensic electrical engineer. He specialises in issues pertaining to electrical engineering, particularly as they relate to failure analysis of electrical systems, subsystems, and components, including the causes of electrical fires. The inquiry's forensic electrical examination work started in November 2017. The painstaking preliminary work has now been completed, so Dr. Glover can now consider issues concerning the wiring of flat 16, as well as the electrical appliances within the flat. Once he has had the opportunity to digest the voluminous material relevant to that part of the investigation, Dr. Glover's report will then be circulated during the course of Phase 1. Professor David Purser is a toxicologist and an expert in fire toxicity and human behaviour. He has been instructed by the inquiry to provide a report for Phase 1 on three matters. First, the production of toxic gases and consequences to occupants of different generic fire scenarios and conditions occurring in fires similar to those likely to have occurred at different stages and locations during the Grenfell Tower fire. Secondly, the likely causes of incapacitation and death at Grenfell Tower, including those whose bodies were consumed by the fire. And third, the possible toxicity performance of materials present in Grenfell Tower. It is hoped that his Phase 1 report will be available to core participants in early September. Both of these new experts will be giving oral evidence in October, when Phase 1 turns to consider the detailed expert evidence relevant to this phase of its work. I now turn to the necessary background to the fire. And I start with the building. Grenfell Tower stands in the Lancaster West estate, which is located in the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. The Lancaster West Estates scheme was designed by Clifford Weirden and Associates in the late 1960s. Phase 1 was approved in 1970, and construction of Grenfell Tower by contractors A.E. Symes of Leighton in London commenced in 1972. The building was completed in 1974. Grenfell Tower is owned by the local authority, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, or RBKC. RBKC is an inner London borough of royal status. It is the smallest borough in London and the second smallest district in England, but it is one of the most densely populated in the United Kingdom. Grenfell Tower was part of RBKC's provision of social housing in the borough. At the time of the fire, the tower was home to a mix of social housing tenants, private tenants, and leaseholders. The management of social housing in the borough was devolved to Kensington and Chelsea TMO, or the TMO, a tenant management organisation, in 1996 under the then Right to Manage legislation. Grenfell Tower comprises in all 25 stories, ground to level 23, plus a plant floor at roof level. It is around 67 metres high, and it originally contained 120 one- and two-bedroom flats, 6 dwellings per floor, on 20 of the 25 stories, including the ground, with the other 4 being used for non-residential purposes. After the most recent refurbishment, it contained 129 flats. I'm now going to introduce you to some detail about the building. This is where Grenfell Tower stands within London, just to the west of Marylebone, to the north of Hammersmith and Shepherd's Bush. You go to the next, please. That is a plan view of the locality, and just pausing there, you can see Grenfell Tower in the middle, with, to the south, 3 walkways, and if you start to rotate to the east, you can see Hurstway Walk to the west, Testerton Walk in the middle, and there, just coming into view to the east, is the 3rd walkway, Barrington Walk. The name is just appearing. To the east, we have Treadgold House, sitting on the east side of Grenfell Road, and to the northeast of that, you see there the Kensington Leisure Centre. To the northwest of that, running from the east, not to the northeast of the building, and running to the northeast, is Kensington Aldridge Academy. And to the immediate east of the building, we have Lancaster Green. You could see the A40 running away there to the west, and the London Tube line with Latimer Road Station to the southwest of the building. If we just pause there, you can see that we're looking at the east face and the north face, and Lancaster Green lies immediately to the building's east. If you pan in just a little bit, please, to the building, you can also see a little bit more detail of the green, which you can see is bedecked with trees, and just to the south and to the southeast of the building, in its southeast corner, is a covered area, sometimes known as the garages, or the walkway roof, as the evidence will sometimes refer to it, which sits at the north end of Barrington Walk and Testerton Walk. If you just pan on round to the north, please, you can see that running to the north of the building from west to east is a pedestrian walkway, which then cuts down southwards, skirting Lancaster Green. Kensington Aldridge Academy, always to the north. And if you move round to the west side of the building, you can see coming into view what isn't in fact on this model, but is a green area with trees, and that is a playground. And as we'll see in a moment, access to the playground is from the ground floor nursery. If you just please move on round to the west, and then just take me to the southwest corner. I'll just point out a feature of the building which is important, just pausing there. You can see there that on the west face, within the face of the building, are two vertical columns, and on the south face, if you pan to the south, you can see there are three internal vertical columns. The west and east faces had two vertical columns, and the south and north faces had three. Those columns formed an important architectural feature in the geometry of each of the facades, and we will be coming to look at those in a little bit more detail shortly today. If you go to the next section, please. So far as access to the tower is concerned, you can see there that the main access, the principal access route, is Grenfell Road, running from the south to the north. And you can see that it performs a left-hand turn running to the east as it tucks in under the roof of the walkway before turning right to bring you immediately outside Grenfell Tower. That was the route that the evidence suggests was taken by the initial pumps arriving on the night of the fire to attend to the incident. There are two other approaches in blue there. Silchester Road, which comes in under the railway tunnel from west to east and then goes south, and Station Walk. Those were not vehicle access routes, at least primarily. And if you just, again, rotate, please, around to the west of the tower, everybody can get a good view of what the principal access route and the secondary access routes were. Thank you. Could you please go to the next section? Bollards. Bollards feature a little bit in this story, and we thought it right to identify where they were. There are fixed bollards to the southwest of the building, and there are retractable bollards identified in those two locations. If you could just please pan in on those so we see the detail. They were bollards which would otherwise, if up, have restricted access to the building on the night, but they were retractable, and we will investigate the retraction of those bollards and the time at which they were retracted. If you could please go to the next section. Water supply. Here we have identified on the model where the water supply for the fire brigade was to be found. There are four sources of water. These are hydrants, and if you could just if you could pan in a little bit there, you'll see that there are two to the west of the Aldridge Academy, and then one underneath, or just underneath, the covered walkway to the southeast of the tower in red, just next to the trees there. And if you could please pan in on that as best you can, we may be able to get a little bit more detail. And that was the principal fire hydrant utilised on arrival by the LFB, as we understand it, on the night of the fire. And then there is a fourth hydrant to the southwest of the building, indicated there on the right-handmost sign, indicated in red. If you could just pan around again to the west, we could see a 360-degree view of the building in relation to the fire hydrants. And again, I should, when we come to it, note the point that the fire hydrant there to the southwest of the building was close to the dry rising main inlet, which is, as we'll see, to be found on the south of the tower at ground level, just to the left of the main entrance door. Could we please go to the, I think that'll do. Could we please go to the next section, which is lifts? This is a plan view on the right of where the lifts, or lift shafts, are to be found in the building. And you can see on plan view they're indicated in red squares. So the lift lobbies lie to the east of the lifts in all cases, and the lift shafts run up from the ground floor up to the lift motor room, as you can see from the 3D diagram there. As I say, you could see the north compass just disappearing from view behind the red lift shaft on the model, and the lift shafts, as I say, were located to the east of the lift lobbies in all cases. We'll come to see this in a little bit more graphic detail in just a moment. Before we do, could you please go to the next section? Flat 16 and the route out of flat 16. If you just pause there for a moment, you can see the geometry of the staircase approach to and from flat 16. Flat 16, as I've said, lies on the east elevation, occupying essentially the northeast corner of the building on the 4th floor. And there are a number of staircases which one has to go down in order to get out of the building. If I can just go into plan view to start with, and then we'll come back to the 3D view in a moment. That is the plan view. And so in order to exit flat 16, the occupants would have had to have left the front door, which you see there on the right, and then gone right, and then immediately left through the lift lobby, left into the stair door, and then left again down the stairs, and then right and down the stairs, and then again down several more flights of stairs to bring one out to level 2, where there is a landing or mezzanine, and then down again several more flights of stairs to bring you out of the exit into the open air through the main entrance to the building. If I can just ask you to pause there, Connor, would you just identify where the dry rising main inlet is to be found? Yes, it's there to the left of the main entrance. Thank you. Could we now please turn to the next section, which is drawings, and we start with the ground floor, we may. Now, this is the ground floor layout. You can see the entrance there to the south, and then moving clockwise, going to the west, we have the community room, and then the nursery on the west face, and the whole of the north face. And then moving round in the clockwise direction onto the east face, we have the east windows of the nursery, and then a refuse chamber, a staircase, and the transformer chamber. And then in the far southeast corner, we have the staircase, which we've just seen on the previous part of the model. Could we please see the first floor? This is the first floor layout plan. Again, moving in a clockwise direction, we start with flat 2, occupying the southwest corner, flat 3 on the west, flat 4 in the northwest, flat 5 in the northeast, and then on the east side there, a community meeting room. And then the next floor, this is the second floor layout plan. Again, starting in the south, moving clockwise, we have flat 6 in the southwest corner, and then the boxing club, which occupies the rest of the west side, the whole of the north side, and part of the east side. And if you could please then go to the third floor layout plan, which we now have, again moving in a clockwise direction. We have from the south flat 8, 9, 10, and 7. Those were new flats as a result of the 2016 refurbishment. 4 flats only on that floor, somewhat larger than the flats that we see from floor 4 to floor 23. And if you could please turn next to the 4th floor. As I say, this is the 4th floor layout plan, which was the same, replicated up the building. I will this time start on the east face with flat 11 being the lowest of the numbers, the 6 numbers. We have flat 11 on the east side, flat 12 on the southeast, flat 13 on the southwest, flat 14 on the west, flat 15 on the northwest, and flat 16 on the northeast. And again, just, if we can, just looking at the plan, you'll see that there in the middle are the lift shaft squares and the 2 lifts there on the east side of the lift lobby. And on the west side of the lift lobby, we have the door which goes down the stairs into the stairwell. If you could just identify that with the mouse, that would be helpful. We'll see it again in just a moment a little bit more graphically, but to give you a plan view, that is where the lifts are, that is where the stair to the stair door is, to the stairs. And just to the north of that is the refuse room and refuse chute. If you could please now just go to the next section. This is a 3D model of the plans that we've just seen, and I think I can take these quickly. What the intention here is to provide a 3D idea of the various features inside the building. So we start with the building core walls there in grey. The AOV, the automatic opening vents for smoke, has a control box there in yellow, which you can just see there in the main entrance hall on the west wall, just to the north of the grey door. There'll be some evidence about that control box in due course. Moving on down the quay, you can see in green there the ground floor lift doors. And moving on further down the quay, I think that's probably all we need to show you from that floor. If we move to the next floor, floor 1, you can see the stairs to the south, on the southeast of the building, to the bottom left-hand corner of the picture, which we saw before, and leading to the landing there, which then comes into the lift lobby. Features there are, we have the building core walls there in grey. We have the dry riser, which is the dry riser outlet, which is where the London Fire Brigade plug their hoses into. And you can see it there, just to the left of the lifts, to the southwest of the lift lobby. And that is replicated on all floors up the building. So it's there. And it's important to remember where that is in comparison with various flats. We have the flat front doors, which are just coming into view there in yellow. The lift doors in green again, and the stair door, which is opposite the lift, just there. If you go to the next level, please, floor 2, this is where the boxing club is, which is the big space to the north and west of the building core. The building core is there in grey. There is a dry riser there as well, which is just illuminated there. We have the stair door as well, which I think, although it's illuminated, isn't showing up. There it is. The stair doors which bring one down. And in turquoise, a very bright blue, we have the bridgehead. Now, there'll be much evidence about the bridgehead, where it was located, and its various times of movement during the night. It is important that I understand exactly where the bridgehead is located, and it is in the lift lobby there, on the second floor, right in the centre of the building. If you could then please turn to the next floor. This is floor 3, with the 4 large flats. Again, we've got the party walls there in brown. So that divides off the 4 flats on the 3rd floor. The building core walls there. We have the dry riser outlet again there in the southwest corner of the lift lobby. We have the lift doors shown in green. We have the stair door there again, and I don't think we illuminated it, but the AOV, the automatic opening vents there on the wall, the smoke vents. And I think that's all we need from that plan. And then if we go to the 4th floor, first of all, if we could look at flat 16 in plan, occupying the northeast corner of the building, you can see, as we will come to in much greater detail when we come to the evidence of the occupants, but you can see the flat front doors of all of the flats on that floor in yellow, the flat 16 front door in yellow there to the northeast corner of the lift lobby, and you go in and there is immediately opposite you a bedroom. If we can just identify that with the cursor there. Next to it, a second bedroom. The hallway then runs down past the lavatory and bathroom on the right into an L-shaped living room in the northeast corner, which is then divided off from the kitchen by what are sliding doors, and that is the kitchen space of flat 16 of Grenfell Tower, where the cursor is now. If you can now move then into a slightly more angled view so that you can see the other main features for the moment, we can see the AOV on the walls there, just between the doors to flat 16 and flat 17. We can see the dry riser outlet tucked away there in the southwest corner of the lift lobby. We've got the lift doors there in green, and the stair door there in purple or pink, brightly illuminated. And just dwell on that for a moment, if you would, please. You can see now the route very easily from flat 16, and indeed all the other flats on that floor, and indeed all other floors, which take you to the stair door. And there'll be much evidence about that. In blue, illuminated now, out of the yellow front doors, is the blue route in blue, which people would have to take from their individual flats to the stair door. If you could now go finally, please, to floor 23. It's exactly the same layout and exactly the same features, except that you will note that, and there is some evidence that on the landing of floor 23 was a metal gate impeding access to the 24th floor and the roof plant. Thank you very much. There were also in the building various CCTV cameras. We didn't show them on the model because there is still a little bit of doubt about where precisely they're located. It may not matter. We have 5 in the main entrance, 1 outside the boxing club over the stairs there, 1 in the lobby on level 7, and 1 in one of the lifts. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move on now to some detail about the construction of the building, but I'm looking at the clock, and the transcribers have been galloping to keep up with me for the last hour. I wonder whether now may be an appropriate moment for the transcribers' break.
Yes, thank you very much. Would 10 minutes be about right?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chairman.
I'll rise for 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Mr. Millett, before you resume, can I just say, I'm sorry that it's rather crowded at the back of the room, but I hope you'll understand that we wanted to enable as many people as possible to be here in the hearing room to see and hear what's going on. So please bear with us, we'll do our best. And the other thing is, I know that it's rather warm in here. Now, I've asked people whether we could turn up the air conditioning or do anything to reduce the temperature. I'm told we're doing all we can, but can I just make it clear that if you want to take off your jacket or anything else to make yourself more comfortable, please feel free to do so. And we're doing our best, as I say. I'm sorry we can't do much more. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In terms of its original construction, here is a picture of the building before the latest refurbishment works, which were planned in 2012 and completed in July 2016. Note, please, first of all, the concrete structure. And you can see, again, as I said before, the three central and corner columns on the north and south facades, three there in the centre and the two columns on each of the corners. And the east and west faces have the two columns centrally running top to bottom. We also have running horizontally across the building concrete spandrels. These are the spandrels there where my cursor is. And note, if you can, the detail of the original windows with these white sandwich panels between the windows. The building had a reinforced concrete core. It had reinforced concrete floors. It had perimeter reinforced concrete columns. And on the exterior of the building were, as you can see, horizontal concrete panels. The windows were sliding aluminium frames, and the infill panels, or sandwich panels, we use the words interchangeably sometimes, are there. On the concrete columns, precast biscuits, as they were called, were used as permanent facing for the columns. The building had a layout we've seen now, which is familiar. Flat 1 on the east facade running in a clockwise direction round to flat 6 in the northeast. And again, you can see from this plan the lift lobby with the lifts again on the west side and the stair door on the east side. Noting, please, 6 flats per floor. They number from the centre of the east facade clockwise round to number 6. Flat 16 is not on the northeast corner. To work out which flat numbers are on a given floor, you add 3, the number 3, to the first number or first 2 numbers of the flat. So, for example, flat 16 is on the 4th floor. Adding 3 to the 1 in 16 gives you 4. And it's the 6th flat, flat 6, on the 4th floor. Flat 26 is on the 5th floor, flat 6. And flat 195 is on the 22nd floor, flat 5. On the plan, you can see that whichever floor you are on, the flat where the last number is 6 is always in the northeast corner. So 16, 26, 36, etc. And just note on the plan for the time being, the lobby, the stairs, the lifts, and the stairwell door, as I've said before. Those are going to become very important in terms of the detail. Turning to the 2016 refurbishment, in terms of the history of the building, the most significant development in terms of the state of the building on the night of the fire is the 2012 to 2016 refurbishment. It's described in detail in section 4 of Dr. Lane's report. This on the screen is an image of the building taken after the refurbishment works were completed. It's taken from figure 8.32 of Dr. Lane's report. And if you would note, the columns on the north, east, south and west faces have been overclad, and you can see the cladding running up the columns here where the cursor is running. And you can see that the corners have also been overclad. The spandrels running horizontally below the windows and above the windows have been overclad, and the sandwich panels have been, or infill panels, have been replaced with new sandwich panels. So have the windows, and we will be examining the new windows in a moment. Now, this was a substantial refurbishment. Planning permission was sought first in 2012, and an initial lead contractor, Leadbitter, was appointed. However, after a further procurement process, Ryden Maintenance Limited was eventually appointed the design and build contractor in June 2014. The architect for the 2012 to 2016 refurbishment was Studio E. The employer's agent and quantity surveyor was Artelia Projects UK Limited. Specialist fire engineering advice was provided by Exoval Warrington Fire. The client for the refurbishment works was KCTMO. The refurbishment works were funded by RBKC, and the funds were released in May 2012. The Department of Building Control at RBKC acted as Building Control Authority, and they conducted a number of inspection visits between August 2014 and July 2016. The building certificate for completion of these works was signed by RBKC on the 7th of July 2016. The refurbishment work affected both the outside and the inside of the building. It incorporated the overcladding of every story of the existing building with a cladding system comprising, among other things, exterior insulation and a rain screen, an aluminium rain screen, or ACP, as we will hear. The cladding subcontractor was Harley Facades, a company formerly known as Harley Curtain Wall Limited. Additionally, there was a full refurbishment internally of the very lowest floors of the tower, between ground and level 3 inclusive, including structural works. That included the creation of the 9 new flats in these lower levels that we've seen from the model that we looked at earlier this morning. There were also building services works within every floor and within every flat within the tower. The mechanical and electrical engineer was Max Fordham, and the services contractor was J.S. Wright. These internal building services works included the fitting of a new heating system to all areas. It included the provision of a new boosted cold water distribution system, and also the refurbishment and extension of the smoke control and environmental ventilation system, together with some alterations to the dry riser system. Dr. Lane and Professor Bisbee are going to introduce the important aspects of the physical building in their presentation the week after next. That will include an explanation of how the new facade system was configured. In terms of the key features of this system, I start with the rain screen outer layer that we saw a moment ago from the photograph of the building. This was a Rainobond 55 PE polyethylene cassette system, aluminium composite panel, or ACP. This consisted, as we can see from this picture, of a 3mm thick core of polyethylene, which is there on the picture in black, bonded between two 0.5mm thick pieces of aluminium skin. And you can see the aluminium skin and the polyethylene or PE core on both of these pictures. Now, polyethylene is a combustible synthetic thermoplastic polymer which melts and drips upon exposure to heat, and which can also flow whilst burning. It has a high calorific value as compared with other common construction materials, and it will provide a fuel source for a growing and spreading fire. It melts at 130 to 135 degrees centigrade, and it ignites at 377 degrees centigrade or so. These aluminium composite panels, ACPs, covered the face of the building where they were hung onto rails as spandrel panels moving horizontally, and were also present on the columns of the buildings, as we've seen. There were also fins of ACP around the top of the building, as you can see there, where the cursor is, which created an architectural crown. Now, this ACP rain screen outer layer was on the exterior of the building between levels 4 and 23. It was manufactured by Arconic Architectural Products, and it was fabricated for specific use at Grenfell Tower by CEP Architectural Facades, who cut it and shaped it for application on the building. According to Arconic's opening submissions, they accept that this product was not of limited combustibility for the purposes of the building regulations, and their position is that this should have been obvious to any construction professional. Behind the main ACP spandrel panels were two layers of combustible polyisocyanurate, or PIR, polymer foam insulation attached directly to the building. Now, depending on its location on the building, that PIR insulation was of two alternative kinds. It was either Celotex PIR RS5000, or it was Kingspan K15, which is phenolic. As to Celotex, you can see here from this picture how it was applied behind or as part of the spandrel structure. And note to the right of the polymer foam insulation board is indicated the aluminium cladding rail. You can see the detail of that just there running up and down in the black. I've got my cursor on it. There is the aluminium cladding rail there and on the right side, and to the left side also another aluminium cladding rail. And that was onto which the cassettes were to be hung. But as I say, behind it you can see the polymer foam insulation. And note also the exposed cut edge. As to Kingspan, You can see it there. So far as Celotex is concerned, and we'll go back to it there, the RS5000 was also used on the insulation, or as insulation, on the vertical columns that ascended the building on each of the faces, 2 each on the east and west, and 3 each on the north and south. And here we see the insulation in situ on the columns. And you could see that it's Celotex. Now, PIR has an ignition point of 306 to 377 degrees centigrade, but a low thermal inertia. Now, as Professor Bisbee explains, what this means is that PIR has a comparatively low time to ignition, and it can support rapid fire spread of adjacent materials because it effectively insulates the cavity from heat loss. As to Kingspan K15 phenolic, I should say that it seems that this accounted for a relatively small percentage of the cladding surface area compared to the Celotex RS5000 product. And further investigations are continuing by the inquiry team. Present in the facade system were also a number of open cavities, some of which were significant in terms of their size and their location. This is a topic to which I will return later in my opening address when I summarize the main hypotheses which are beginning now to emerge from the expert evidence. However, it should be noted that some cavity barriers had been installed in the facade system, both in the horizontal and in the vertical orientation. These figures here, on the next slide and the one after, which are from Professor Bisbee's report, show the key features on the exterior of the rain screen cladding. On this first slide, which is Professor Bisbee's figure 8 in his report, you can see the ACP spandrel panels in blue. There they are, the spandrels running horizontally above and below the window sets and the sandwich panels. You can see the sandwich panels or window infill panels there in yellow, and on the left-hand side there's a small one there which we'll come to in a moment. That contains the extractor fan. And in pink here we have the column ACP panels, which were Celotex RS5000, as I've said. Here is a photograph after the fire of the exterior of the cladding system. And note, again, the same features. The spandrel section ACM, or ACP, rain screen cassettes. You can see them there still in place. Here are the column ACM or ACP rain screen cassettes moving up the column side of the building. And there are 2 window infill panels, and as I said just a moment ago, the kitchen extractor fan, which is mounted within the window infill panel there at the top left-hand side of the window looking in from outside, or the right-hand side of the window looking out from within. This next slide shows the key features of the cladding. It's taken from Dr. Lane's report. It's figure 8.8 in section 8 of that report. It helps to explain in more detail the makeup of the new facade system, including the insulation behind the ACP rain screen panels and the location of the cavity barriers in the facade. And looking at the detail of it here, you can see the various features. You've got the original concrete spandrel panels running along horizontally there where the cursor is. And then you've got the rain screen cavity insulation behind these rails here, and various different metal angles for cladding fixings in green. You've got those on the column there, and you've got the U-shaped cladding rails running horizontally there across the spandrel. You've got vertical full-fill cavity barriers within the column there, and various other features over which the column rain screen cladding panel was affixed. And you can see that on the column there where the cursor is, and you can also see it here on the other side. And the upper diagram shows how the spandrel cladding panels were hung onto cladding rails, which you can't see other than in an exposed form there. You've also got something we'll come to in a moment in blue, but I would ask you to note it, which is the EPDM polymer membrane there, which was the damp-proof course, which will be looked at in some more detail by me and particularly by Dr. Lane when she comes to give her presentation. It's important also to say something about the new windows which were installed as part of the main refurbishment of the tower between 2012 and 2016. New windows were installed on every floor, and the refurbishment effectively moved the new window frames outwards so that they sat no longer flush with the concrete as they had been, but flush within the new cladding system. And this is helpfully illustrated in figure 8.24 of Dr. Lane's report. And this is a photograph taken which shows the windows being reduced in size than the original windows. The changes created a gap that you can see between the concrete and the facade system. And you can see that the gap was filled there with EPDM, a polymer product. You can also see from this that the windows had been moved outwards to sit within the cladding system. And then the gap, as we'll see in a moment, was covered with UPVC, or unplasticized polyvinyl chloride, a solid combustible plastic. And that is what the windows look like after completion of the refurbishment. You can see the new window jamb in yellow on the vertical sides of each of the sides of the window. You can see a new windowsill in UPVC finish, and the window header also had a UPVC finish. And then sitting in front of the window frame, running along the ceiling, was the original pearl board ceiling filler strip. I'll come back to pearl board in just a moment, but just note it there at the window header for the time being. So far as UPVC is concerned, it is combustible and it deforms at relatively low temperatures, 75 to 100 degrees. Now the UPVC appeared to have been glued on to 25mm PIR insulation material, manufactured either by Celotex or by Kingspan. They were either Celotex TB4000 or Kingspan Thermopitch TP10. Now PIR, I've already mentioned, polyisocyanurate, a rigid plastic foam. It is combustible. This particular product was much thinner than that which was used for the cladding affixed to the external concrete. Behind the insulation was a damp-proof course, which we've seen now already, of EPDM, which stands for ethylene propylene diene monomer, which was fitted as a weatherproof seal, it is combustible. The new window infill panels, which we can now see on this slide, were a product, it appears, called aluglaze. These are the white panels on the building post-refurbishment. Like the windows, these were also set flush within the cladding system. Aluglaze is a product comprising an insulating core of 25 millimeters of styrofoam, which is expanded polystyrene. And you can see it on this slide in blue. It's the blue insulation filler, sandwiched between aluminium panels of 1.5 millimeters thickness. Styrofoam is combustible. It ignites at 356 degrees centigrade. Internally, above the windows, go back to that slide. Internally, above the windows and in a band around the perimeter of the ceilings, which we've just seen, was a strip of original insulation board which was left in place during the refurbishment works. It's believed to be a polyurethane foam called pearl board. Polyurethane, or PU, is a rigid combustible plastic with an ignition temperature of 356 degrees centigrade. And there it is on this slide. In kitchens in the tower, there were kitchen vent panels. These were incorporated as part of the window set. The ventilation fan was set within an insulating core panel that was also combustible, possibly styrofoam or expanded polystyrene of another kind. This slide here is from Dr. Lane's figure 9.20 in section 9 of her report. These features of the kitchen windows are helpfully illustrated by this slide, which is 9.19 of Dr. Lane's report. This is a picture taken in flat 13 of Grenfell Tower, which is on floor 4, but on the opposite side of the tower to flat 16. This is exactly what the kitchen window set in flat 16 would have looked like before the fire. In terms of the history of the building, there are two other major works which were carried out at the tower, which were separate from the 2012 to 2016 refurbishment, which are of key relevance to our investigation into the condition of the building on the night of the fire. Those major works are, first, the flat entrance fire door replacement works, which took place in 2011 from levels 4 to 23 inclusive. This was a program of works which were intended to replace 106 flat entrance doors with fire doors which complied with relevant fire safety standards. Secondly, the gas supply works which took place between October 2016 and June 2017. This new tenant gas supply was required because of corrosion within one of the existing gas risers, which had led to a small gas leak in September 2016. The gas works were unfinished at the time of the fire in June 2017. Dr. Lane will be giving a detailed presentation about the history of the building, including the major refurbishment works and the building more generally, in her presentation the week after next to set the scene for Phase 1. I now come to the next section of this introduction, which is the active and passive fire safety systems relevant to Grenfell Tower. In her detailed Phase 1 report, Dr. Lane identified the active and passive fire safety systems which were present in the tower at the time of the fire. Her oral presentation will cover that topic in terms of identifying what those active and passive measures were. They are summarized, helpfully, in a table, Table A, of Section 2 of her report. In terms of passive systems, those included the single stair, the lobbies, and the fire doors, all of which were required to be fire rated to particular standards in accordance with the building regulations. Note also compartmentation, fire stopping, and cavity barriers as elements in her list of passive fire safety systems. The flat entrance doors and the doors between the lobbies and the stairs were both important elements of the lobby enclosure, and both of which were required to meet specific fire safety standards. In terms of active systems within the building, some key features are as follows. First, all flats were provided with smoke alarms individually. To that end, it should be noted that there was no whole building alarm system, nor was that required under the relevant regulatory regime. Secondly, a smoke control system had been provided in the lobbies, which was designed to isolate all lobbies except the floor where any fire was initially detected. Thirdly, the lifts had some features, consistent with a fire lift, which should have enabled the fire service to control the lift in particular ways in the event of a fire. And fourthly, the lobbies. The lobbies were fitted with dry risers, as we've seen from the model. In other words, empty pipes, which can be externally connected to a pressurized water source by firefighters, and which can then be used to plug hoses into on each floor in the event of a fire. Examples of these dry risers can be seen in the following pictures from Dr. Lane's report. These are taken from figure 14.69 of Dr. Lane's report within section 14. And just looking at them, on the top left-hand corner, we've got the ground level inlet. That, as I said before, was next to the main entrance of the building to its left, and then the various outlets from the dry rising main, level 1, level 2, 3, 4, and as an example, from higher up the building, level 9. As I will outline later on in this opening, Dr. Lane has evaluated the performance of these active and passive safety systems on the night of the fire, and she'll be giving oral evidence on those matters in the latter part of Phase 1, once we have heard the evidence from the firefighters, the survivors of the fire, and the bereaved. And I now turn to the events of the night of June the 14th, 2017. It is Dr. Lane's preliminary opinion as follows. The events that unfolded at Grenfell Tower on the 14th of June 2017 rapidly became unprecedented. Rather than a fire within one internal compartment, a major fire in the building envelope occurred, and this itself was on multiple stories and across multiple compartments. Additionally, there were very many post-flashover fires internally in multiple compartments on multiple stories. The building envelope itself was therefore a major hazard on the night of the fire. The active and passive fire protection measures within the Grenfell Tower were required to mitigate an extraordinary event, and as a result, the consequences were catastrophic. Turning to the fire within flat 16, Professor Nick Dade's clear preliminary view is that the fire started in the kitchen of flat 16 on the 4th floor. That view is shared by the forensic examiners retained by the police who carried out an examination of flat 16 in the immediate aftermath of the fire. This on the screen is a floor plan of flat 16, which includes the kitchen in the bottom right-hand corner. This is a figure taken from Professor Nick Dade's report, figure 12. We know that the flat is on the northeast corner. We have the front entrance there at the bottom of the picture. We have a storage cupboard to the left as you go in, and then the hallway. Crossing the hallway, moving north, you go into bedroom 1. Bedroom 1 was occupied by a lady called Almaz Kinfu. Next to it was a second bedroom, occupied by a lady called Elsa Afewerki. Moving down the hallway, to the right there is a bathroom, and beyond that, a lavatory. And then at the end of the hall, to the left, you enter the living room, which is an L-shaped room, which has sliding doors to the south. And then in the far southeast corner of the flat, the kitchen. The kitchen is divided from the living room itself by sliding doors. This further floor plan here on this next slide shows the kitchen in more detail, including the location of a number of appliances or features of the kitchen. This is now looking at the kitchen from north to south, south at the top, north at the bottom, if you will. And you can see the column, the exterior column of the building in the top left corner of the diagram, and the window in blue on the very far left, running top to bottom. That's the window set, which shows you the approximate position of the extractor fan and the rest of the kitchen window. And note particularly that the kitchen window abuts the column. From the door on the bottom right-hand side of the slide, the door opens from left to right, and you enter straight into the kitchen from the hallway. Immediately opposite you, there is a microwave. To the left of that, a sink, and then a washing machine, and then a cooker, and then next to the cooker, nearer the window, the tall fridge freezer. There is then a gap where unknown materials were, and there'll be some evidence about that, we anticipate. And then you have the window and the approximate position of the extractor fan, remembering what we saw earlier about precisely where the extractor fan was positioned within a combustible panel. And then the assumed position of an old freezer and a small fridge perhaps on top of the old freezer. Precisely how these were laid out will be the subject of further evidence about flat 16, which is to come. In Professor Nick Dade's view, the evidence thus far suggests that it is more likely than not that the area of origin of the fire was in or around the tall fridge freezer in the southeastern part of the kitchen within flat 16. The area of origin includes the area between the tall fridge freezer and the window. The fridge freezer was a Hotpoint FF175BP made by Whirlpool Corporation. That area in the flat can be seen in the following figure from Professor Nick Dade's report, which is marked by the red line on the left of this sketch plan in a curved area between the window and the tall fridge freezer. Now, Mr. Chairman, I've reached this point a little bit earlier than I was otherwise going to. The reason I've stopped short is this. I'm now going to be showing some still photographs and then a lengthy video piece of some 12 minutes showing the building on fire on the night. Now, anybody who thinks they might find these images distressing, as they might, should leave the room. And I was going to suggest that we take perhaps a short break now and come to it. The video itself is not immediately following, but there are pictures which people might find distressing. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm in your hands. We can rise for 5 minutes to allow people to leave the room or the live stream rooms if they wish to, and then we can continue until 12:45, or we can pause now and I can complete the rest of my address after the prayer and lunch adjournment.
Well, it would make more sense, wouldn't it, for you to carry on and see the photographs and videos at this point?
Yes, very good.
Well, then, shall I rise for a couple of minutes?
Would you?
Excuse me. And I'll be close by, and I'll just rise for long enough for people to decide whether they wish to leave or not.
Very good.
And as soon as we're ready to continue, the usher will get me.
Very good. Well, shall we say 5 minutes?
If it needs 5 minutes, 5 minutes.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman. The first call to the London Fire Brigade was made at 00:54 a.m. by Mr. Behelu Kabidi, who was the tenant of flat 16. We will be shortly hearing his call, which lasted about 1 minute and 36 seconds, as part of the video. We will be receiving evidence from him and from other occupants of the flat who were present in the flat on the night of the fire. At the moment, there are some question marks about whether Mr. Kabidi's health enables him to attend to give oral evidence to the inquiry at this time, in addition to his various written witness statements. We propose at this stage to read his written evidence into the record and then to call him to give oral evidence in September if necessary and if his health permits it. I should also mention, Mr. Chairman, that on Friday evening the inquiry received a lengthy written witness statement from Mr. Kabidi, produced at the invitation of the inquiry, which we are urgently considering. We have disclosed the statements for Almaz Kinfu and Elsa Afewerki, both those that they did for the police and those that they did for the inquiry, and our present intention, subject to anything new emerging, is to read those statements into the record, but not to call them to give oral evidence. In terms of how the events on the night unfolded, I am about to identify some key points in the timeline about which we have some confidence. However, I must stress that all times at the moment remain provisional and will need to be investigated further and confirmed by the factual evidence as it emerges. Following Mr. Kabidi's call at 0:54 hours, at 0:55 hours, 3 pumps were dispatched by the LFB in response. These were G272 and G271 from North Kensington Fire Station and G331 from Kensington Fire Station. There were a total of 16 firefighters on their way. At 0:59, a 4th appliance, or pump, or fire engine, the terms are interchangeable, was dispatched from Hammersmith, which was G362, with a further 4 firefighters on it. It had been dispatched because it had been determined that this was a high-rise incident. We will be hearing and reading evidence from firefighters who initially attended the fire, and we will be examining in some detail the thermal imaging camera footage taken by the firefighters attending within flat 16 at the start of the fire, and examining in detail its particular timing. The initial incident commander was firefighter Mike Dowden from North Kensington. He set up the bridgehead on level 2, 2 floors below the fire floor, as the witnesses will say was usual practice. Evidence is beginning to emerge that the first crew at the scene discovered that the firefighter switch for the lifts, which would give the London Fire Brigade sole control over the lifts, was not operational. The dry riser was charged at the external point with water, and the evidence of the first crews in attendance suggests that hoses were plugged into the dry riser outlet on the 4th floor, but we will have to explore precisely the detail. Based on the thermal imaging cameras carried by the firefighter crews, the firefighters arrived at flat 16 at around 1:07. We will be exploring with those firefighters in more detail when they give evidence precisely what times they arrived on the floor at the door and what they did, and what they saw as they fought the fire in the kitchen of flat 16. As Professor Nick Dade summarises it in her report, although the area of origin is likely to have been in or around the tall fridge freezer within the kitchen of flat 16, the precise cause of the fire and its exact point of ignition is not at this stage known. What the evidence does suggest at this stage is, first, that it is more likely than not that the fire had an accidental cause as opposed to being a deliberate act. Secondly, the initial fire grew hot enough to escape from flat 16, possibly by deforming the UPVC covering of the window reveals and penetrating the combustible materials around the window frames before igniting the facade materials. The first firefighters did not get to and did not open the kitchen door inside flat 16 for the first time until 1:14 a.m. and were not fighting the fire within the kitchen until 1:18 or so a.m. By this stage, it is probable that the fire had already taken hold of the exterior cladding, with melting and burning material dripping from that cladding. Here is a photo if we can please have slide 33. Thank you very much. Here is a photograph taken of the fire in the cladding, and you'll note that the capture of that photograph is between 01:09:26 and 01:09:36. It comes from Professor Bisbee's report at figure 60. And you can see that Professor Bisbee has identified that at this stage flames were extending from the window on the exterior and that there was a regular flow of falling, burning material. Precisely what happened in the kitchen to get the fire to the combustible materials around the window set and to ignite them is not yet known. The science of the heat and fire spread which would permit ignition of these materials is covered in detail in Professor Torrero's Phase 1 report. It will be explored with him in detail when he gives evidence. The inquiry will use its very best endeavours to assist the chairman to determine the cause and origin of this catastrophic fire that consumed the tower. In many respects, however, the cause and origin may not be of primary importance. While that is a question the inquiry will strive to answer, an even more pressing question from the perspective of the public interest and public safety lies in the question of how the fire penetrated the exterior envelope of the building and thereafter spread so rapidly and so ferociously up and around the exterior and back into the building. In terms of flame spread and the key points of the chronology of the night, the inquiry and the experts have been assisted by a significant amount of video footage provided by members of the public to the police in the days after the fire. There are also other sources of media from the night of the fire, including footage from body-worn cameras of police officers and from CCTV located outside the tower. The inquiry's experts have been analysing that available footage. They have been able to examine precisely how the fire spread across the building and over what time period. I'm now going to play you a video montage which the inquiry experts, which Professor Luke Bisbee has put together from footage sent to the Met by members of the public. It starts with Mr. Kabidi's initial 999 call, and it shows the very early development of the fire up the east face of the building, up to 01:36 a.m. The video lasts about 12 minutes. I should again repeat the warning that the video contains graphic scenes of the building on fire. It also contains a bit of soundtrack, and some people may find it distressing. So if anybody has had second thoughts after our first warning and a break, then I would suggest that those who don't want to see and hear this video leave the room at this point. Now, Professor Bisbee, when he comes to do his presentation the week after next, will be talking us through this video in more detail and will highlight certain particular features of the first phase of the fire spread, which he considers significant. May we please play the video?
Fire brigade.
Yeah, hello, hi, in the fire, flat 16 Grenville Tower.
Sorry, a fire where?
Flat 16 Grenville Tower. In the fridge.
Right, hang on.
Flat 16 Grenville Tower.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder whether we can
16,
stop this and make the
postcode?
volume a little bit louder. Can we please turn the volume up so that everybody in the room can hear it, please?
W11 1TG.
Could you start?
W11 1. Fire brigade.
Yeah, hello, hi, in the fire, flat 16 Grenville Tower.
Sorry, a fire where?
Flat 16 Grenville Tower. In the fridge.
Right, hang on.
Flat 16 Grenville Tower.
Flat 16, and what's the postcode?
W11 1TG.
W11 1 T
One
for
TG.
Tango.
Yeah, but can you quick, please?
Yeah, would you just, I have to get the address. Okay, Glen.
Flat 16 Grenville Tower, W11 1TG.
The fire brigade are on their way. Are you outside?
Yeah, I'm outside.
Yeah, well, the fire engines are on their way. Just tell me how many floors you got there.
It's the fourth floor.
Right,
Alright,
okay.
quick.
They're on their
It's
way
burning.
already. Yes, I know it's burning, but they are on their way. You've only just called, as long as you're okay. Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah, as long as
By the
you're...
free side, yeah.
Pardon?
By the free side, okay, can you quick?
Yes, you wait outside.
Yeah, I'm outside. I'm waiting outside.
Okay, so the fire engines are on the way. They will be there soon, okay?
Okay.
You've only just called us, so it will take a minute for them to get it.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just gonna put that.
Right, can I let you go?
What is the stage, Alice?
Hello?
In the city. What is the city?
Hello?
What? Hello?
Can I let you go? You are outside, yeah?
Yeah, I'm outside.
Right, okay, bye.
Fire! What this? Fire brigades! Look, the house. Yikes! Don't make fires, kids. Parents, keep your kids away. Yeah, fire brigade. It's the block, bro. It's not high enough.
Så skandale tycker jag.
Going up 2 floors and coming up the 2nd floor above the gym. It's going.
That's going. They need to get up there. That's going up.
It's going up. The whole block's gone.
Tracking on our coffin.
You'll be close, but you're great.
Someone done some dumb shit, boy.
Just looking like
Where was you? He was just in my yard, and my neighbour's not brothers getting very close to my yard.
Yeah, that's
like
spreading. You know it's spreading.
That's 4 floors.
They're on one floor. That's in my yard. That's my yard. It's in my yard.
Fuck. But there's only one guy.
Mom! Just try and take it out, innit?
En fan, ken han hade prickat tillbaka?
Ja, jag har klart också.
Oh, is my dad still inside?
Look, at Grenfell Tower at like 1:30 in the morning. Fucking hell, fire, and that's getting bigger and bigger. People are gonna die, and I'm scared.
You okay? I told you get out. I told you get out.
Yeah, people stay there because people they do. Man, you see that shit fall off? Of course, the thing is on. Come down. I imagine wow.
All that new work's for nothing.
Are you taking the video? Look at that paper, man. Hey, bro, this is sticky, that's all yours.
No, I don't know how to react.
Go! Wow.
Whoever started that is pissed, you know.
start getting infected.
There's no alarm. It's going to go right to the top of that building, isn't it?
It's cut down. Yeah, and I'm coming down, I can hear them.
There's fires there now on the bar.
I smell, you know, I pulled my charger.
I've been taking the charge as well. Yeah.
It's gone all the way.
Yes, I'm sure.
And there's innocent lives in there.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's probably now an appropriate time to break for the prayers and lunch.
Listen, you and I and many others in the room have seen that footage or parts of it many times, but it's truly shocking, isn't it? Every time you see it, it strikes you in a very similar way, very strongly. All right, thank you. We'll break there and resume at 2 o'clock, please. Thank you very much.